Welcome back to the Hoops Temple podcast. Y'all know me, Nathan Schwartz. Joining me from New Zealand, Dylan Williamson. How's it going?
Doing good, Nate. What's going on?
Not too much. We've got our typical lag issues, so we're not going to try to do this live. We'll let the people get to see it cleaned up or hear it cleaned up in the audio version. But we're recording this 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Sunday, so a good 2 hours before Game 2. So that will hopefully explain why we're not going to dig too deep into the finals. But Dylan, how'd you feel about Game 1?
It was interesting coming in because you had these two different sides of the bracket where the Mavs had to overcome some pretty talented teams in order to get there, and tore down Minnesota, who tore down probably the championship favorites at the time, the Nuggets, and got through the Clippers, who were a talented team as well, even without their best player. And then you had the Celtics, who just kind of cakewalked through all these weak and injured Eastern Conference teams. And it was really going to be interesting to see how that worked out in terms of team quality, the true team quality. Jason Kidd deserves a lot of credit for what he was able to pull off through this Western Conference run. But I think Joe Mazzulla and his game plan and the Celtics' preparedness to execute the game plan was the story of Game 1.
Yeah, I really liked what I saw from Kristaps coming out there. As soon as he entered the game, he was aggressive. I liked those mid kind of high post touches that he was getting and just being aggressive shooting over guys. I do worry about him falling in love with that shot and continuing to just try to shoot those. So he shot exceptionally well on contested mid-range shots, being like, you've got a 6'9", 6'10" guy on me. Let me shoot it. That feels a little bit fool's goldy to me, but it's hard to get too excited about potential changes or whatnot, because it just was a beatdown. And I think in a landslide game favors the Celtics. A close game, I think, where Luka and Kyrie could be the difference makers, that favors Dallas. So Dallas just has to figure out a way to keep it close.
And that's if Luka even plays. So by the time the people are hearing this, they'll know the answer to that. But there's growing concern coming out of Dallas that Luka won't be able to perform tonight, won't be in the game tonight. He's been listed as questionable 2 hours before the game, which is always concerning. But yeah, the mid-range difficult shots that Porzingis was able to make, an offense out of. I agree with you. That was one of my takeaways from the first game, is that as good as Porzingis was, and I think he was probably their most important player, you wouldn't expect those shots to continue to fall at the rate that they were. And so even though they were able to get success, I do think that they have to be looking at okay, we need to do something different, because what succeeded for us in Game 1 isn't necessarily something that we're going to be able to just keep making shots doing, which is getting Kristaps those post mid-range jump shots. The defensive scheme seemed to work perfectly, though.
Yeah, a lot of single coverage, a lot of taking away the passing options. This is for Luka Doncic. I thought Jaylen Brown had a really impressive defensive game. When third quarter play is happening, Luka brings them back within 8. I was really curious who is going to step up from Boston, who is going to make the play. And you got a Tatum ISO that didn't go anywhere. You got a Brown ISO or a drive that didn't succeed. But Brown made 2 really big defensive plays that led to 2 offensive plays for Boston, and where they scored. And he is currently my favorite for Finals MVP. I love Jason Kidd stirring the
Jason
pot.
Kidd's favorite too.
Oh my gosh, it's a great coaching move. Let's just stir the pot. Let's say he's better. Let's make sure the media is having the is it Tatum or is it Jaylen conversation. I think those two guys have really figured out whose it is and how to complement each other and play together. But you know, there's not much other basketball going on. If you get every NBA writer talking about it, maybe it can disrupt some things.
Yeah. I still like the inside track for Porzingis to come out of nowhere and take it because I think that his defense is going to be the key to the series. If he's able to continue to do what he did in the first game, which is stay out of the main action to always be in help position and provide rim protection and seal off the rim, um, and force the likes of Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington to make top of the arc threes, which of course are the more difficult ones. They were able to destroy the Clippers and get through the Timberwolves by those guys making enough of their corner threes. But the top of the arc is a whole different shot. I think if he's able to continue to wall off the paint, that could be the real difference maker for them.
I think this is the year that we finally have a tie finals MVP bracket. They only asked like 10 to 12 media members about this, and they asked them at the last moment. So like, this is theoretically the easiest award to have a tie. Maybe All-Star MVP, which we've had that, but like, I forget who Grant Hill won Rookie of the Year with. Was it Grant Hill and Jason Kidd? Um, but we've had ties for Rookie of the Year voting, and that's like 100 media members, and that's ranked choice voting. So like, we could. It happens. We could finally have a Finals MVP tie if I get my way.
Yeah. Are you in favor of
He's
moving the voting for Finals MVP to not directly after the Game 7 has just occurred, where you're like getting maximum recency bias, or do you like to have that Finals MVP get his trophy on the stage right after the game with the championship trophy?
I would like him to get it on the stage with the championship trophy, but what I think they need to do is they need to identify who the writers are, because from what I've heard, like Zach Lowe talked about it one year, he's like, they basically come up and tap you on the shoulder at the end of the fourth quarter, and they're like, "Hey, you've been selected as one of the people to decide." I think having that pool predetermined, and they can go into the game being like, "All right, this is a 3-1 series. What do we think over the first 4 games?" Have some sort of strong leanings so that we can be a little bit less recency bias.
Yeah. That is a really bizarre way to do it, to like this massive historical award. Like Finals MVP is one of the most important awards in a player's career, and in the season, probably second only to MVP. And it's decided by like the NBA at the last minute. It's like, ah, fuck, who's here? Go get Zach Lowe. Who else is
Yeah.
here? Like, just ask, just tell them, be like, hey, in 10 minutes we've got to give out Finals MVP, the second most important award in the season. Can you figure it out, please?
Yeah, like imagine you're one of the writers and you're like, I really gotta be like, game just ended. I'll be able to run to the bathroom, come back before they present the trophy, and the NBA is like, where the fuck did Zach Lowe go? Where's where's Dave McMahon? I guess we'll give it to Brian Windhorst. Like, see who he'll vote for.
Could you imagine if that's how they did MVP? It was like that same sort of like rinky dink lucky dip system where they just like get to the end of the season, they're like, hey, we're giving out MVP in 5 minutes. Who do you got? Like, what? I haven't prepared for this.
Yeah, it's not a great system. But all right, just trying to think keys for Dallas to get back into this. They got to figure out a way for Luka to be more dynamic with the passing. He had 6 potential assists, is that keeps getting thrown around. JJ suggested putting him into the post more to try to allow the offense to operate around it. Richard Jefferson is against that. I'm against that. Jefferson's against it from the wear and tear. I'm against that from, I think the Mavs do really good at having Lively or Gafford as rollmen. And if you put Luka in the post, you're kind of sacrificing some of your rolling abilities. What tactical changes would you try to implement to give Dallas a better shot to get back in this?
I think one of the simplest things can just be the positioning of the players, because I think that the way that they were able to take out the pick and roll really well is by pre-switching Porzingis so that he wasn't on the roll man, and having guys stay home on the corner shooters. If you just rearrange the floor, which is not necessarily easy to do when you've been playing the entire season one way, but if you rearrange the floor so that it forces Porzingis to either stay on the big, which then creates issues, or switch, but the only person that can switch onto is Kyrie. I think that's one way you can do it, because if he's going to want to stay out of that action, you give him a choice. It's either you're in this pick and roll and you're not protecting the rim, and also you might have to switch onto Luka and you're going to get cooked, or you have to switch onto Kyrie and then I can swing it back up to him and you're going to get cooked. Instead of having Washington as that high man or Jones Jr. as that high man, get some actions going where they're able to get Porzingis into the play by making it more difficult for him to switch out of it, essentially.
Yeah. And, if he's guarding Derek Jones Jr., Jones Jr. can set screens and roll. He is a high flyer. If he is guarding PJ Washington, it gets a little more complicated because I don't like PJ's rolling. I'd rather have him pick and pop. Also, PJ's just really easy for someone else to switch on and cover. So
yeah, that's one of the difficulties, is that Boston can pretty much switch like 4 guys onto 4 different Mavericks players. Like they're good with any of their 4 perimeter players guarding any of the 4 Mavericks. Really any of the 5 Mavericks players.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I quite love Derek White guarding Gafford when he's rolling to the rim. Just not quite as much elevation to stop him, but he is leading.
He's got good hands, so like he'll take a charge.
Bigs. And he's leading most guards and bigs and blocks. I know what he was the 5th or 6th in blocks. So I know a lot of those are contesting on the arc, but Dallas has to find a third scorer, someone to step up, maybe giving Tim Hardaway Jr. some more minutes, although he's been kind of buried lately.
Yeah, and that's how they were able to succeed is Jason Kidd was like, I'm just going to stop playing Tim Hardaway, like altogether. I'm going to play Dante Exum and Jaden Hardy over him if I need to get another guy in. I'm just not going to play this guy at all.
Did I send it to you, the thing about every finals team? Or not every finals team, but every year in the finals, there has been a former New York Knick.
Interesting.
Every year since the NBA's existence, there has been a Knick, like future or former, and I think it was like 70% of them were on the championship side. And this year we'll continue that trend because you either have Porzingis winning or you have Tim Hardaway Jr. winning. So thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
Interesting. Which team was it that broke the LeBron teammate streak, where like LeBron or one of his teammates won the championship every single year? Was it the Bucks that didn't have a LeBron teammate or something?
I feel like him and Jason Terry had to have crossed paths. Was Jason Terry on that? No, Jason Terry retired the year before they won the chip. I don't know, but the Shaq streak like went.
No, it was the Shaq, not LeBron. Yeah.
I guess he played with LeBron, so that does help extend your streak, but it also went like retroactively back into the 80s or something. I'll have to look up that streak, but any bold predictions for game 2?
It's tough because we don't know if Luka's going to play. There is like the classic game 2 adjustment. I would almost be tempted to say that the Mavs would pull it out if Luka's going to play, based on the idea that Mazzulla was able to essentially sucker punch Jason Kidd coming in. Like he had the perfect scheme devised and the Mavs weren't able to adjust, whereas now they kind of know what they're going to do and hopefully will be able to figure it out. But it's just tough because we don't know if Luka's actually going to play.
Yeah. I think he'll play. I feel like he's been questionable for like half the playoffs. And I think they're going to take this one. I think they have enough of counters. I think Luka will rise to the occasion, kind of bounce back. Hadn't seen the finals before. Kyrie said something earlier in the playoffs, how he kind of sits back and waits to see what Luka's going to do, and then he shows up. So I think if I don't buy it, but I think if Luka does show up, Kyrie will also play better by association. So I think game 2 is going to Dallas, and listeners who are hearing this Monday, Tuesday, whatnot, you guys already know. So
After the Celtics won 132-91.
God, if that is the actual score, I wish you had said something slightly more realistic, like 121 to like 107, and then that would be funny.
I don't know if Dallas can get to 100 though.
They'll get to 100.
Let's stop speculating, because no matter what, we're just going to look dumb.
Yeah. So let's move to something else we can speculate about. I'm going to flip around your rundown you sent me a little bit. Bloomberg is getting into the Timberwolves game, where we've now got another potential billionaire bidding on the Wolves. Is their price too high to pay for Timberwolves basketball? Are we worried about this, or what are your thoughts?
It's a very bizarre story, actually, the whole Wolves ordeal that's going on, where essentially A-Rod and what's the other dude's name?
Mark Lazary? No.
Mark Lowry.
Mark, yeah.
Had an agreement to buy the Wolves, and then their current owner's just like, actually, no, we're not going to do this. And they're just like, wait, what the hell? Like, we have a deal. Like, we've finalized this. We've got contracts. We've got like this whole like succession plan where like we're going to start taking over. And then he's just like, nah, we're not doing it anymore. And maybe it's the success that the Wolves have suddenly come into, where now $1.5 billion is not sufficient for the team with Anthony Edwards. Should be under contract for the next 10 years. And all sorts of weird speculation. But now, they've got a man with a ridiculous amount of money joining in. One of who's the current Timberwolves owner? I keep blanking on his name.
Crap. I really should be able to think of this sooner.
Glenn Taylor. Where one of the accusations that Glenn Taylor made is that A-Rod and Lowry didn't have the funds necessary to make the transaction. Well, getting Michael Bloomberg, who has like a net worth of like $100 billion, that should solve that issue. And so that could be this man is probably best known in recent memory for trying to become the president, funding his own campaign to get the Democratic nomination to the tune of about $900 million before losing to Joe Biden. So not exactly a prestigious run from this guy. But I do like when really, really rich people are able to take governorship of teams, based on the idea that the Timberwolves are about to become ridiculously expensive. They may have to dump people just to save money. And if you've got a guy who is worth $100 billion and is willing to, for nothing more than like his own like perceived prestigiousness, is willing to throw away $900 million. $900 million is like what the Wolves are going to owe in luxury tax if they don't make a big trade in 2 years. And so I'm all for ridiculously rich people who are willing to throw money away for nothing other than prestige to get involved in ownership. And Glenn Taylor like hasn't been a good owner. Like,
no,
it's
historically cheap, historically bad decisions. I mean, listen, the Timberwolves have Kevin Garnett and decide to tamper and destroy Garnett's entire future to bring in Joe Smith, who plays the same position as Kevin Garnett and does the same like it'd be one thing if you get caught tampering to like I don't know, get Michael Jordan, get LeBron James, get like hell in 2010 tamper to get Dwayne Wade. Like there are players worth tampering for. But Taylor has been a historically bad and historically cheap owner. With the potential of expansion coming, new media rights deals, these could be really big payouts for owners, like just the boost to the league, boost to the profit margins. I feel like that has something to do with his decision to kind of renege on the sale, or trying to not do the sale with A-Rod and find a new bidder, because just those two things alone are going to massively either pay out directly to the owners with the price tag for expansion, or media rights deals dramatically increase the value of these teams.
Yeah, and Glenn Taylor's made two claims about why he's pulling out. One is that they don't have the money that they actually need to make the purchase, and the other is that he's concerned that they're going to make moves that are detrimental to the team's success. He's basically accused them of, like preemptively doing what he's done for his entire ownership of make trades to become cheaper at the cost of the team. And so he said that he is staying on as like a hero. He is willing to make the sacrifice of staying on as owner, reneging on this deal in order to ensure that the Timberwolves keep this team together. And so it'd be interesting if he then sells it for just a little bit more money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he sells it for more money to a guy with unlimited pockets, you can still make those claims. I wanted to talk about this at the very end of the episode, but if we're talking about broke boy billionaires and poor ownership, I started watching Clipped. Have you seen anything about Clipped? Have you watched the first 2 episodes?
I haven't. I'm aware of its existence. I haven't watched any of it. Is it actually good? It doesn't
So,
look good from the from the limited amount that
listen,
I've seen about it.
almost no one looks like who they're playing. The Blake Griffin casting is exceptionally bad. The DeAndre Jordan's really bad. I don't understand how they got Chris Paul this bad. Like, I'm sorry. Figuring out like getting DeAndre Jordan, you need a really tall person to also look like DeAndre Jordan. That can be a difficult cast. To get Chris Paul, get whoever State Farm guy was. Like you had a guy that looked like him, that played his brother. Just get them both. Yeah. But it's not great, but I do really like watching things from the NBA become TV shows. And like I think we need to look at them the same way anybody would look at like a historical TV show. It's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be 100%, word for word. You're going to have some drama. I've got a friend who's really into Elvis, and any Elvis Presley movie comes out, they go see, and they're fine with it. Like, Elvis is like, they know what's true and what's not true, but they enjoy Elvis, and so they watch it. And, it's kind of where I'm at. I'm really enjoying the first 2 episodes, knowing full well that this is not peak cinema. Or
Is it like
accurate.
on the same level as like Winning Time?
No. It's much worse than Winning Time.
Okay.
I hate to tell
Okay.
you this.
Typical Clippers always have to be the second best.
Oh yeah. No, you got like prestige HBO, good casting, fairly good acting, and then you got Hulu, not great casting, decent acting, kind of subpar writing, but like it's fun. I would encourage people to watch it. So, wanted to see what your takes were it. So I'll have to check back in when you've seen it.
No, I'm boycotting because it perpetuates anti-Clippers stigma.
So there is a
I
there
want
is
like
a
a I want a $100 million movie um that covers like the transformation under Steve Ballmer. Like it portrays him as like a hero and a savior. It needs to be like directed by David Fincher, and it's just the story of how Steve Ballmer turned the Clippers from the worst organization into the best organization.
they have to win a championship for that to happen.
All right, once they win a championship, I want my David Fincher Steve Ballmer puff piece movie.
Good. Good. All right. Well, now that we've been discussing things for 25, 30 minutes, let's get to what we actually came here to talk about, and that's free agency. You sent me a whole bunch of free agents. It's here. You said top 20, but I think there's like
Oh yeah, that's
significantly
just the
more.
pool. I was thinking we'd pick out the top 20, but that's just the pool of players to choose from.
Mm. All right. All right.
I think maybe the way that we do it
So,
is we'll take turns.
okay. Would you care to start us off then?
Yeah, I'll go first. The most prominent. So the idea with this is just to sort of give you at home a rundown of what's going to happen in free agency, who are the players that are available, and what teams are going to be looking for. And also to display that this is quite a weak free agency class. Like it's not going to take long
Hmm.
before we get to like clear bench players in the top 20 of free agency. And what that could mean for some of these players getting paid or not getting paid. But the biggest free agent is Paul George, who has the option to leave the Clippers. Yet another season of injuries ending the playoff run early. Um, Lost in the first round to the Mavericks. Kawhi Leonard wasn't healthy. And, with the new CBA coming in, it makes it even more difficult for the Clippers to improve. Essentially, the best they can hope for is to just run this entire team back. They have no real um, ways to improve. And so Paul George can leave. He could, if he wanted to stay with the Clippers and the Clippers wanted to keep him, he could have signed an extension. So the fact that he is becoming a free agent is an indication that either he's interested in seeing what's elsewhere or he and the Clippers are not on the same page in terms of what his new contract will be like. And still playing at a all-star level, still one of the 15 best players in the world. Unrestricted free agent, Paul George.
I like it. Now, I don't disagree that he's well. I kind of disagree about him being the best this free agent, but he really has three options on where he can go this offseason. Barring a sign and trade, which could happen, and maybe New Orleans wants to get in there and flip Ingram for him. But barring a sign and trade, Philly's got enough cap space for him. OKC has 35 mil. There's not a lot of teams with cap space. You're looking at the Pistons, 76ers, Magic, Jazz, Thunder, Spurs, Charlotte. Those are the only 7 teams with projected cap space from what I'm seeing, using a 141 million cap projections. In theory, the 76ers are very interested. But if you're Paul George, do you want to go to Philadelphia and bank on a continued growth from Tyrese Maxey and health from Joel Embiid? Is that worth it? Is if they're going to give you more money than the Clippers, is that worth it?
um, it's sort of a tough decision because in theory you're leaving the Clippers because this is a team that just can't stay healthy and like runs into the same problem every season, and then you're going to go to the Sixers who get eliminated every year because Joel Embiid can't stay healthy or perform in the playoffs. So it's like weird to sort of hitch your wagon to like the exact same problem. Um,
Hmm.
OKC sort of becomes the more interesting team, a potential return. This is a team that has cap space now, um, but are about to get expensive once some of the really talented young players start needing extensions, which is a couple years away. So they can sign Paul George now and deal with the extensions later. But this could be sort of their one opportunity where they are going to have a lot of cap space. The return of Paul George to
Yeah,
OKC.
they still can't get him a max slot. Like they still don't have that type of money. So I feel like OKC is the less realistic. I
I
know
mean,
the Clippers weren't offering the full max, but
they can make moves too. Like their cap
they
space that
could.
they have is not necessarily all that they can come up with. Like if Paul George is like, no, I'm not going to you because I want 10 million more. Like Josh Giddey makes $8 million. Um, they've got players who will have some value, like Usman Jang, who's still got potential. Cason Wallace, who played really well, making 5 million. Like they could easily move some of those guys.
They could do is they could move him. They could also sign trade. Yeah, yeah. I'd like to see him with OKC. I just think that gives him the best chance and winning championship. Um, for the second best free agent, I would argue the first best free agent. You do have LeBron James, who has both said that playing with his son is not a priority, and that he would accept a minimum deal with whoever drafts his son. Um, how much is that worth? Like, uh, you know, teams, do you try to draft LeBron's son to get him? How many teams does that really improve that much? Like, could we get LeBron to Denver? Would that then make them like a semi juggernaut? Would LeBron even want to play with Jokic in Denver and help that? Does he want to go back to the Midwest and join Milwaukee? Like, I don't know. I know Bronny is only doing workouts for a limited number of teams, including the Lakers and the Suns, but I don't know who the other two teams were that he's looking for. Um, I don't know. What do you do with LeBron? Where are you hoping to see him end up?
I think first of all, the important thing with LeBron is ignore everything that he said around Bronny. Like ignore Bronny, take that out of the equation. Um, I don't think that's real. Like he's not going to go to a team just because they're drafting his son. I don't think he's going to
Mhm.
care that much if like his son's in freaking Charlotte and he's on the Lakers. Like I don't think he's actually going to care that much. I think the most important thing for him is that he gets into the league. And they can if they really want to play together, they can figure it out later. Like this man doesn't pay for Spotify Premium. He's not gonna turn down $50 million to go take a minimum. He's not gonna leave LA to go play somewhere else. Um, the one thing that I think is real in LeBron potentially leaving is the Lakers' plausibility as a championship team. Um, where they
Well,
are
they're
right
not.
now is exactly. And so where they are right now is that they're not a championship team. And so I think the bigger thing is going to be what moves are they able to make. Um, in theory, they want to make, if they've got a big deal to make, they can trade a couple first round picks. They want to do it at or before the draft. As soon as you use that, I think it's the number 17 pick. As soon as you pick a player, like the value drops a lot. The likelihood that you and the team that you're trading with have the same evaluation at 17 is not high. Um, and so I think they need to do something to improve the team. D'Angelo Russell can potentially leave as well, or they're going to fall into bird rights trap with him where they don't really want him, but also can't upgrade from him because they don't have any cap space, and so have to re-sign him anyway. Which is kind of what happened last time he was a free agent, where they didn't really want him and he didn't really want to go back, but neither of them had any better options. And so I think that they need to make a move. Um, One player, probably the best player that we've seen as a potential trade candidate, come out in this offseason is Jimmy Butler, who wants a big contract, which the Miami Heat aren't necessarily willing to offer. If you're the Lakers, is Jimmy Butler a player that you'd consider trading for with the goal of keeping LeBron and AD together?
No, I don't think he even fits with LeBron and AD. Because like Jimmy is not a shooter. Jimmy is still needs to attack and drive and get in the mid range. His defense would be nice. Him and Davis would be a dynamic defensive duo, but I don't want to pay Jimmy more. I mean, Jimmy has a player option in 2025-26. So, two off seasons from now for 52 million. Like, I don't know why we're rushing to extend him when he's going to pick up that option. And on the D'Lo case, D'Lo's got a player option. He's opting in. He's not going to get that type of money elsewhere. He's not going to get half that money somewhere to a multi-year deal. So, like, the Lakers kind of are what they are. They're not getting much unless some of these other free agents really get squeezed. And I would kind of like to try to breeze through a couple of the free agents. It's like Tyrese Maxey. Maxey's not going anywhere. I don't care where we rank him in this, but they're going to lock him up long term, right?
Yeah. Carry on, because I think you might prove the point that I was about to make. Carry on.
All right. So if just looking at who's got cap space, if Maxey resigns and then Philly goes after someone else, Philadelphia is going to be off the board rather quickly. They're going to sign Maxey and then either sign and trade for someone else who is expensive, whether that be Klay Thompson, whether that be trading for Ingram, whether that be Paul George. Philly's going to take themselves off the board quickly. Now you're down to San Antonio, OKC, Orlando, Utah, Detroit with real cap space, with the ability to sign someone 20 to 30 million. No one worth 30 plus million is going to Detroit. They might overpay some guys, but just looking at the rest of the list of free agents, OG Anunoby probably sticking around New York. Pascal Siakam probably sticking around Indiana. That's kind of your max free agent class. If I'm looking at this correctly, is there anyone else that you think is getting a high $30 million deal or something?
No, and that's why I think D'Angelo Russell actually will opt out. Because as we go down this list of free agents, and this was part of the point of doing this exercise, is you identified, what was it, 7 teams with potential max cap space?
Of 6. And I think
teams?
San Antonio only has 20 million, so 5 teams.
If we say even 20 million, D'Angelo Russell's player option is 19 million. If we go down the list of players that could actually change teams, we're looking at Paul George. We're looking at, like, is that it? Is D'Angelo Russell the second best player that could change teams? And we've got 6 teams that can offer $20 million a year. When those teams can't get their first option of Paul George, all of a sudden D'Angelo Russell is the second best player, and that's why I think he probably will opt out. Like, is he a great fit on any of these teams? No. He's not really a great fit anywhere, just with his skill set. But a team like San Antonio, who doesn't have a point guard, like, he would actually make them a lot better of a team. A team like Detroit, who just struggles to put together competent NBA players, like, he would win them games, which is apparently a goal that they have. And so I think he will opt out. And so I think he will opt out. And as we see the more desirable free agents, which there aren't really too many of, I think he's going to end up quickly becoming like the most valuable player.
Okay. Do you mind if we change up how we were doing this as opposed to just doing a top 20?
Let's do it.
Because you sent me over the list in kind of positional orders. And you said San Antonio is looking for a point guard. I think we all know they're looking for a point guard. whether they get one through trade or free agency. Let's just kind of break down their free agent options. Maxey will be off the board. D'Lo may
Yeah.
or may not. Emmanuel Quickly, restricted free agent. He's probably Toronto's going to try to keep him.
Yeah,
right?
unless they overpay, which is probably not a good idea.
Okay, so the remaining free agents: Tyus Jones, Spencer Dinwiddie, Lauri Markkanen, Markelle Fultz, Chris Paul. He's got a non-guaranteed contract, could be cut to save money. Jose Alvarado and Russell Westbrook has a player option. If you're San Antonio, is there anyone in there that you really like outside of Tyus Jones?
If my goal is I need to get a point guard and I've got money that I can overpay, so it doesn't really matter. D'Angelo Russell is probably my pick of those guys.
Really?
Chris Paul could be
Have you watched
interesting.
him?
Have you watched the Spurs? They have no point guard. They need someone that can shoot and dribble the ball up the court.
I mean, D'Angelo Russell will dribble the ball up the court and then shoot it. So in that sense, he does the two things that you
By
said.
definition, he is exactly what the San Antonio Spurs need. Chris Paul could be interesting. Remember a few years ago when I think it was maybe before he ended up on the Rockets, there was the idea that maybe he would go to the Spurs, or maybe it was when he re-signed with the Clippers. Anyway, he was linked to the Spurs at one point. He looked really, really washed last year. The year before, he was still probably top 10 point guard. And so if his true play is just how he played last year, then it's over. If it's somewhere between his last 2 years, then he could still be a valuable player for the Spurs.
I think he's the most likely one to end up in San Antonio, and it does kind of depend on what they're looking for. If I'm the Spurs, I would personally go for Markelle Fultz. I think Fultz is the best of this class. Fultz and Alvarado try to anchor your defense. Alvarado had a nice shooting streak. I don't know what he ended at, but there was a stretch there where he's hitting 40% of his threes.
I didn't put on the list, but I think I think he's restricted.
Oh, well. Okay, or the Pelicans still have to figure out who they're going to pay because
Yeah,
they got a lot of guys, and I don't know that you break the bank to try to keep Jose as much as I like him. I think Chris Paul may make the most sense going to San Antonio from the Spurs perspective of just he does what they want. He'll be a transitionary point guard while they can kind of buy their time. He's like getting Mike Conley to the Timberwolves. Like he solves your holes in the short term without really creating other ones.
Yeah, and what I like about Fultz too is that he can fit in really well and establish a defensive identity for the Spurs. Once they moved Wemby to center, their defense became pretty freaking solid. So if you've got a good point of attack defender and a good rim protector, all of a sudden that's a really good defensive foundation. Devin Vassell is also a good defender. They've got other guys that they can rotate in and out. Sohan's solid. Calvin Johnson is limited, but he can do a decent job of just like being pretty strong when he feels like it. And you win basketball games by either putting the ball in the hoop or stopping the other team from doing so. And all of a sudden, they're good at one of those two things.
Yeah. Vassell is good at defense when he tries. Vassell does have some consistency and effort issues, just from what I've observed watching him. I think he needs to be more consistent to elevate into that like Chris Middleton tier of really good wing counterparts for a big man. All right, so that's the point guard class. Like the dream is Markelle Fultz for these teams or Tyus Jones. It's like, yeah, that's what we're looking at here. Shooting guards. I think there's a little bit more midterm depth in that. I'm just going to read the list that we've got here. Harden, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with a player option, DeAndre Melton, Klay Thompson, Malik Monk, Bruce Brown, team option. I think Toronto picks that up because he's just more valuable to trade than let
He
walk for
played really
nothing.
badly for them, is the only thing.
I know, but you still just want to control where he goes or see if you can get
I don't
an
know, man.
asset.
He
What's the
underperformed his
deal?
contract last year.
What's he making though? It's like 19 and it's expiring 19. I'm pulling it up. Okay, never mind. It's 23, but still,
and he played to the level of like 7 million.
which is what he was getting beforehand. Either way, I think. Well, all right. Maybe he does become a
It
free
could go
agent.
either way. Anyway,
Yeah, Gary Trent, Malik Beasley, Lonnie Walker the fourth, Buddy Heald, Gary Harris, and Vit Krejci. I appreciate you putting my boy Vit in there.
I think he'll be restricted as well, which I noticed I left off.
Teams in the market for a shooting guard, maybe Charlotte. I don't know if you see Brandon Miller as more of a 2 or a 3 moving forward. I think they played him at both. The Pistons and the Magic just need backcourt help. Also, the Jazz. So, like, there's a few teams looking in here. But do any of those names match up with any of those teams in your mind?
One that you didn't mention, which is the one that is sort of prophesized as the Malik Monk to Orlando.
Yeah.
It's Aaron's worst nightmare.
They're going after him or they're going after Clay.
Yeah. Clay is going to be interesting to see what like sort of market he commands. Like, is he going to get paid on his reputation over like the past 4 years, or is it going to be, where he played last year, which is like a slightly below average defender and a sort of one-faceted offensive player?
If I had to take bets, Orlando's going to try to talk Clay. They're not going to offer Clay enough, or Clay's going to ask for too much, and they're going to end up moving on to getting Malik Monk for less than what Clay wanted. I think Clay is going to receive a big offer from Detroit because Detroit needs to add shooting and wants to shake things up a bit. I don't know if Clay is willing to take that, and if Clay would like to move to the Midwest. I mean, the Mitten State's beautiful. He can borrow my kayaks. We'll let him enjoy the river. But I think I think Clay ultimately probably remains in Golden State for less money than I think anybody would expect.
Yeah, I also think that's the most likely thing, is he's just back in Golden State on like 12 million a year, which is about the mid-level. So like, if you eliminate the cap space teams and then consider that next level down, which is mid-level, like I'm sure someone's going to offer him the mid-level exception. And so if he's back in Golden State on like a mid-level, that seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Trying to see what even is the mid-level this year. We got the room exception being 13. So yeah, mid-level is probably around that projected. Do you think Melton goes anywhere? Because he could be a nice piece. He could be like the third string Orlando option, or potentially a Utah Jazz piece.
Yeah, Melton could be interesting because I think if you only look at last year, he's a better player than Klay Thompson is. He shot just fine. He's a better ball handler. He's a better defender. And so I think he can. I think he could help a lot of teams. But he is probably not a cap space guy. He seems like more of a mid-level guy. So like certainly one of these teams who just need an upgrade defensively or an upgrade in depth. There are like 20 teams in the league that would like D'Anthony Melton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who in this group do you think just gets squeezed and probably ends up taking a mini mid or a tax player, MLE, or something much less than what they're hoping for?
Yeah. Gary Trent seems like he's destined for that. Like he's coming off what, like 18 million. He's not worth that. There's no cap space. He probably doesn't fit in that well with Toronto, so they probably don't want to bring him back with bird rights. And then you go down the list of available players. Like we're just talking, shooting guards here, and he's like the 7th or 8th or 9th most valuable player. And so I think he's the guy that's going to get squeezed. A potential shit shuffle guy. Squeezed veterans love to join the Lakers on a minimum deal, and what the idea that's going to revitalize their career and it always ruins their career. I feel like Gary Trent to the Lakers on a shit shuffle deal seems very plausible.
He was a deflection king a few years back, maybe top 3 or 4 or so.
Yeah.
Getting his defense in, I wouldn't. The names that you sent me, you have him right next to Malik Beasley, who was a shit shuffle guy, Lonnie Walker, shit shuffle guy. Buddy Hield, in my mind, feels like the next shit shuffle guy. Potentially even Gary Harris. I'd actually like to see Gary take a mini MLE somewhere. I could see him going back to Denver. They could use him, especially if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope either declines his player option or just they're able to bring him back, but at a higher number. You kind of got to save some money somewhere. And I'd really love to see Denver not just keep going all in on the youth guys.
Yeah. I'm a big Gary Harris fan. I think he's a lot better than maybe his reputation, because he's playing not a lot of minutes behind some of the developmental guys in Orlando, and also he's playing in Orlando, so no one's watching him anyway. But he's still a really good defender and can he can hit a open shot. That's still a useful skill set. I don't think Denver has the scratch to get him unless KCP does leave. Then he might be the best available option that they have to replace him at the starting 2. But as a depth guy, I think he would add a lot to any contending team. So I hope that he does. Well, I don't want to tell him to take less money, but I would like to see him on a real team playing real minutes.
Yeah, I think with there not being that many real teams that have cap space, OKC they are a real team with cap space. Orlando is probably the second. Well, Orlando, Philly, and OKC. But I assume Philly's going to try to use 2 max slots. Then they're not going to have cap space. Orlando, you could just stick around there. And he was really helpful for Orlando until he got hurt in the playoffs. So I wouldn't hate that.
Yeah, they played some of their best basketball when he was in the lineup.
Yeah. Let's combine the 3s and the 4s here, and I'm just going to kind of read off the guys that I don't think are going to go anywhere. Then we can get into the guys that probably will. LeBron. Yep. Well, we already discussed LeBron and PG. I don't think OG is going to go anywhere. I think the Knicks are going to try to lock him down.
They wouldn't have traded for him without an understanding of the contract it would have taken to keep him, and same thing with Pascal.
Yeah. So that then leaves us DeMar DeRozan, Miles Bridges, Caleb Martin, Sadiq Bey, Tobias Harris, Derek Jones Jr., Slow-Mo, Royce O'Neal, and Patrick Williams. And Williams and Bey are both restricted free agents. Anyone with cap space that you see out there that really wants to get any of those guys?
No, unless you've always got the option of Detroit just doing something dumb. Like Detroit could just go all in on and pay DeMar DeRozan, and that would get them the 10 seed. They can become the Bulls, which isn't that exciting, but it's better than what they were last year. They were trying to win last year and ended up being absolutely terrible. If they were the Bulls, they would have been a lot more happy.
Yeah, I saw discussions for DeMar and Chicago being like at 2 years, 80 million, 40 a year. I think that alone should scare teams. And I think Chicago should run like hell and just say, DeMar, have fun taking a minimum or a MLE and LA teams. But I think he ultimately does stay with Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, it depends the direction that they want to go. They're in a really awkward spot where they're sort of maxed out in terms of what they can do, but also what they can be, and what that is like the 10 seed. Like they don't have a lot of. I guess Kobe White would be the one exception, but they don't have a lot of young players who are going to improve. That are going to, they're not going to get internal development. DeRozan's getting older. Zach LaVine is one of the worst contracts in the NBA, and they're sort of maxed out as not a good team.
Yeah, just kind of even thinking if they had won the lottery this year, that still doesn't make them that much better. I mean, like adding Risache or Sar, just the team has flaws through and through. And I don't know that you want to build around Kobe White at this point. The one thing is maybe Lonzo Ball comes back this next year and is 80% of what we saw him last at, which would be an improvement. Maybe you could trade Caruso for a young piece. But yeah, I don't know what Chicago's doing. They're fighting for the play-in.
Yeah, I mean, if I was them, I'd be trading Caruso for whatever assets I can get. Trade Zach LaVine for literally anything. Let DeRozan walk. Finally rebuild because this team's going nowhere. What their history suggests is they'll probably just run it back.
Yeah. So some other guys interesting in this class. I think Caleb Martin has Orlando or Detroit kind of written all over him. Like, if Miami's going to try to be cheap with Jimmy Butler and not sign him, I don't know how much they're really going to want to pay Caleb Martin. And I think he could be really useful to either Detroit or Orlando in the short term. Just someone who can get them an extra 3-4 wins in a year. Any interest there?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even I wish I had a list of mid-level teams, but he seems like a full mid-level kind of guy. But yeah, a team that is trying to make some improvements, bringing in a guy who can defend and who has shown some ability to score in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be interested to see who goes after Patrick Williams, and can someone offer enough that Chicago won't match it, because he's a restricted free agent. And I do think just getting out of Chicago would be really good for him. Maybe if San Antonio could give him a decently large deal, that would be nice. Because, like, I think there's more to Patrick Williams than what we've seen. I think he can be a really high-level defender who hits the occasional shot. I don't think he's going to be great, but we just saw PJ Washington take a leap after leaving Charlotte. The previous season, we saw Rui take a leap after leaving Washington. Rui was in Washington. I think we could see that kind of Patrick Williams resurgence in a new area.
Yeah, and like he's been this guy that has been valued at far higher than his performance level because of his potential as just like a big body forward with some ball skills. Like those are the guys that become future superstars. But he has consistently failed to live up to, like, if we were ignoring potential and just talking about like what he is, like he's like a decent bench forward. But Chicago is not exactly the optimal place for him to develop. It is unfortunate that he's a restricted free agent, so the only way to get him is to overpay him, and even then, Chicago might just match it. But I think definitely a change of scenery could be good for him, and I think he could still develop into something more than what he's been, which is like as I said, a decent bench forward.
Yeah, I might dare Chicago to match it. They're looking right now. They've got 132 million on the books next season, without DeMar DeRozan, Andre Drummond, Patrick Williams. So without any of the cap holds, I think as soon as you bring back DeMar, you're pushing that first apron. Does Chicago want to be a second apron team? I don't think so.
They're certainly not going to go anywhere near the tax. The one option that they could do is they could stretch Lonzo Ball,
Hmm.
or they could even get potentially a medical exemption to get his contract off the books if he is never going to play again, which seems increasingly likely.
He's coming back. Lonzo will be back next year. I believe in him. The other name from this kind of forwards class that does terrify me. I think Miles Bridges got a lot of recognition from, or a lot of links to the Pistons, and like he showed up at MSU games, gets cheered. I think he's probably done in Charlotte. Detroit seems like one of the places that would be accepting of him after what he's gone through, or what he's not gone through. That makes it sound like he was a victim. What he's done to society.
If you listen to his teammates, he was the victim, Nate.
Yeah. So I hate to say it, but I could see Detroit trying to add him to add just some more overall talent.
Yeah. From like a purely basketball perspective, it's a decent fit for them. They need potentially an upgrade at the 4, a guy that can maybe shoot, and from a purely basketball perspective, he could be a decent fit there.
And what is this? They're looking at $64 million in cap space. The guys that we've already talked about potentially going there to just add some shooting: Klay Thompson, Caleb Martin, and Miles Bridges. You could conceivably get them all
three of those.
Under
yeah.
And if you get those three, you're now starting next season. Cade at the 1, probably Klay at the 2, Martin at the 3, Bridges at the 4, and Duren at the 5. And like, that team on paper seems competitive and very combustible, and weird. I don't think Klay and Miles should be teammates, but it's something.
Yeah, they want to improve, and that's the kind of team that would get the 10 seed. Yeah. That's what they want. Another interesting one could be the Tobias Harris return to Detroit.
Yeah. What do you do with Tobias Harris?
Yeah, it is tough. Like, he's an unrestricted free agent who's gained the sort of negative reputation because he has been overpaid. As we look down this list of free agent forwards, 1, 2, like, he could be the second best player. Somewhere in the 2 to 5 range of forwards that could actually change teams. And so be interesting to see where he ends up. The worst case scenario is that he just the Sixers strike out on everyone and they just bring him back. Like, wouldn't that just be the most depressing thing for both parties?
I think he needs to go. I think just the perception around him. But I pulled up his numbers here: 17 points per game, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, 35% 3-point shooting. Been higher. The previous year was 39. Like, Tobias is belittled and hated because of his massive contract. If Philly does strike out, bringing him back at like 15 million, 20 million, honestly is not a bad deal. I know he disappears. I know that 17 points is a quiet 17 a lot of the time. But like, if he becomes a mid-level guy, or if the money even drives up faster than that, and someone's able to snag him for like the mini MLE or 5 million, like, if he becomes a shit shuffle guy, teams are going to kick themselves that we let Tobias slip through our fingers for nothing.
Yeah, like, if he does slip past the full mid-level teams, that becomes a bargain contract. Like, what's his real value? Like, probably like 15 million, and he's got this negative reputation just because he's been overpaid. the expectations have been higher than what he's able to achieve, but like his actual value is probably like 15 million. The mid level's like, I don't know, what is it, like 12 million? So even a mid level team getting him is getting, in theory, positive value.
I've got his basketball reference page pulled up here. Do you know who drafted him? Who he was originally selected by?
Bucks.
The Charlotte Bobcats.
God damn.
Maybe he just goes back to Charlotte. He could play for Jordan. He would fit in. He'd be a good piece. He'd replace his Miles Bridges. Would add a little bit more of a spacing element into the team. Him and Brandon Miller running the break or spacing for the 30 games that LaMelo is healthy for. I'm just saying, I don't hate it.
I think he's a good professional as well. Like it'd improve the culture for that team to get a guy like Tobias.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's got to be worth more than D'Lo.
I think they're probably pretty similar. They're like both sort of fringe starter kind of players.
Yeah,
who can put up points, but you know they're kind of empty, and you don't rely on them in the playoffs.
Our last category here, we've got centers, and you only have 4 on the list. Isaiah Hartenstein.
It gets ugly, man.
It does. Isaiah Hartenstein leading the way. Nick Claxton, who I would think should be higher. He just wasn't loved. Jonas Valanciunas, DeAndre Jordan, Precious Achiuwa, and Mo Wagner, who has a team option. I think the team's picking up that option.
I would pick up that option on him.
Precious could go a number of places.
Yeah, I think the biggest team to consider when looking at this center market is the New Orleans Pelicans, who have Jonas Valanciunas as their starting center, would desperately like an upgrade, and they're going to look around the free agent center market and find that Jonas Valanciunas is actually the third best player and the best player that they can afford. And so it's a difficult position for them to be in, which could increase their likelihood of making a move with Brandon Ingram. As you know, you look at free agent centers and you're like, oh, I could get Precious Achiuwa. Like that doesn't help me whatsoever. So we need to do something else, and the only thing left is an Ingram trade.
Ingram to Brooklyn in a sign and trade for Nick Claxton and some other pieces could be interesting. I do think you want to consolidate. Like, New Orleans has too many guys already, so I don't know necessarily that like breaking up Ingram into multiple pieces makes you better. But I really would like Claxton's defensive versatility and just athleticism on that team with their athletic wings. I think then you could redesign the defensive scheme as opposed to being more drop or less drop coverage, more switchable coverages, which is what they do a lot with Larry Nance Jr. I think that could be a really nice thing for them. And Brooklyn keeps saying, hey, we don't want to trade Mikal Bridges. We want to try to get another star, and then we want to have cap space, and we're going to use those guys to go get a third. This could be their way. And Ingram and Bridges, not a great combo, not a great pairing, but it's something.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes like the 4th or 5th best wing duo in the league. And for the Pelicans, you know, there are 2 things that you can do with a center. First of all, you need someone to rim protect because Zion is not going to do much for you there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the dream scenario is that you get someone at the 5 who can shoot, which is incredibly unlikely. You know, guys that can shoot and defend the rim. There are like 3 of them in the league. You're not going to get them unless you trade
them in the draft
for them, supposedly.
Yeah.
And so the next best thing that you can do is someone who has a vertical spacing. Zion is a good passer. If he can get downhill, draw the big man in, someone who he can just flick the ball up to. And Claxton, with his length and his athleticism, he could be a good partner for Zion from that perspective.
Hear me out. What if you're New Orleans and you say, we're going to take a step back to take a step forward? We're going to trade CJ, Ingram, and Valanciunas. We're doing double sign trades here. We're trading all of them to Brooklyn. And we're going to bring back Ben Simmons, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton.
Interesting. Spencer's make too much money to make this work. He's like a zero in this trade, but
I think you need him to make this work cap wise. Just
okay,
because Ingram makes 30. He'll make 36, and CJ makes 33. I don't know what
those guys make a lot of
Claxton's
money.
going to get.
Yeah. Claxton's probably like a $20 million player, especially if you're gonna convince him that he has to agree to the sign and trade.
I have no idea what a $20 million player looks like anymore. Just
I think the easiest way to look at it is, are they clearly a starting caliber player? And Nick Claxton is. If you're a clear starter, like there's no real discussion that you're a bench player, then I think you're a $20 million player.
So I remember playing NBA Live 2005. Maybe it's 2005. And the cap in that game is like 55 million. And now we've got guys making 55 million. Like just individuals. Luka's next contract, the last year of it's going to be like 81 million a year. Like the cap just continuing to rise. Like I don't know if paying Claxton 20 million is an underpay or an overpay. I think I'm leaning toward being under at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's like his value in this season, and then as you say, the cap's going to go up 10% every year once they sign the new TV deal.
Yeah. But so hear me out on this play. You then have Dyson Daniels step into the starting point guard role. You're going to start Claxton and Zion. And then for your 2s and 3s, you can go Trey Murphy and Herb Jones with Cam Johnson coming off the bench, or maybe you start him over one of those. But you can always have 2 of those 3 out there for length and defense and shooting. I think it gives you a lot of versatility, a lot of wing support, and it kind of sets you up to allow some of the younger guys to move into more prominent roles. It's an elite defensive team that can switch 1 through 5.
Yeah, it's a very good defensive team. I don't think Dyson Daniels is a starting caliber NBA point guard, which would be the one downside. Is now your offense actually gets pretty rough. Unless Zion can get back to like where he was it 3 seasons ago, where he was like a top 10 player and was like essentially running point guard for them. Unless he does that, then you're a rough team on offense. And you're making a lot of moves. I think to get Claxton is the big thing there. Like everything else is sort of rotating, guys around without gaining anything.
Yeah.
But all this to say,
I prefer to trade Ingram for more of a point guard type.
Yeah, all this to say, there are teams like the Pelicans who need a center, and there aren't any good centers that they're going to be able to go and get. And so this could be a potentially an off-season, a free agency where the free agent moves aren't big. Like a lot of these ones, like we've said, they'll probably just go back to the team, or they'll go join Detroit and become part of the 10 seed. But this could be a big move for trades because so many of the good players in the league are already under contract. There are teams who need to make moves, who have assets and have ways of taking on salary to make moves. Of course, remember this is going to be the first off season where you can use your mid-level exception as a trade exception and take back a player, make it up to the mid-level, as opposed to signing a player to a contract worth the mid-level. And so I think it's going to be an off-season where we see maybe a lot more trades than what we're used to, even if the free agent signings aren't that exciting.
I wouldn't hate that. That'd be good. I do know last touch, Isaiah Hartenstein, really like what he brings. Really good with the things. His rim protection, his switch, not a ton of switchability, but he doesn't do terrible in switch. But then his playmaking and passing on offense, I'm always kind of not in awe. He's not like a Jokic level passer, but he makes good, smart passes and can be a connective piece. I don't think there's a fit for him. Like, I don't know that Orlando is gonna pay him a ton of money to go there, and they already have Goga Batadze. They have potentially Mo Wagner coming back and Wendell Carter. Like, I don't know why with those three options you go all in on Hartenstein. San Antonio doesn't make sense there. OKC, they keep saying that they want to stay 5 out. I don't think they're going to throw him the large offer. Philly's got Embiid. Not going to use one of their 2 max spaces. Detroit, I've heard Detroit rumored to look at giving him $100 million over 4 years. I don't think that makes any sense for the Pistons. He does not solve any of their issues. So I think he could return to the Knicks for a fairly reasonable contract.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing with him is that he doesn't have full bird rights. He's got early bird rights, which means for the second time in his career, he gets screwed because the team that he's on would actually love to pay him, but they just can't. He had that before he joined the Knicks with the Clippers, who would have loved to have brought him back, but because they signed him to a minimum contract, had no way of giving him a decent deal. Well, they could have got to the taxpayer mid-level, but they decided to use that on John Wall instead. And so not great decision making there, if that ever was an option. But he's in a tough position because he's making $10 million. The Knicks can only offer him, I think it's 130% of that contract, and so, or can they do the old Reggie Jackson? You can offer a player the average NBA contract. I think they probably can. So they can offer either 130% of what he's making, or they can offer him the average NBA contract, which is probably in the similar sort of range. So I think he's going to get underpaid.
Sure.
I agree that he's a very valuable player for the Knicks. Quietly, one of the best rim protectors in the league, decent finisher inside, good rebounder, good short roll passer. I think a very good player. I just said a clear starter is worth 20 million. I think he's a clear starter, and so his value is probably about 20 million.
Yeah. Well, and so if the Knicks can only sign him for 13 to 15 million, depending on the 130 or average NBA contract, doing a sign and trade, you're still limited by what the Knicks can sign him to. So, he's not going to get a ton more going somewhere else. None of the teams with cap space make a lot of sense for him, unless Orlando just really says, "Hey, you're our guy. We're going to move out Wendell and Goga and Mo," which I don't think they'll do, because I think you have to at least have Mo, because you've got Franz. Like, you're not going to break up the brothers. Maybe move out everyone else, but I think he's going to get squeezed, and I think we're going to come into next season and be like, man, kind of sucks for Hartenstein. Like,
yeah,
guy could have been
and
another year, could have gotten a lot more.
Yeah, and maybe it is tricky because he could take a shorter deal to try to get back into free agency where there's more options for him. But also he hasn't really made any money in his career. And so this could be his one chance of like actually securing a decent NBA contract. He's coming off of minimums, and then he signed a 2 for 16 deal with the Knicks. And so like he hasn't really made a lot of money in his career. So maybe he just takes this as of like, yes, I'm probably worth 20 million, but you're giving me 15 million a year for 4 years, that's a good amount of money. I'll just take that and get the security.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a 15 million for 4, you're financially set for life. Your children are set for life. Like if you are smart with your money, that is life-changing amounts of money. Whereas I don't know what he's made in his career, but is this his second year with the Knicks?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a 2 for 16, and before that, it was on the Clippers at a minimum. And before
Yeah,
that, he was out of the league.
So right now, his pro career total earnings prior to the season were 13 million. This year being 10, so he's gotten 23 mil. You add 60 mil on that, you're good. You're set for life. That feels very tempting to take, as opposed to saying, "Let me get 15 and then try to re-enter and get more." Like, probably just makes sense for him to take the secure option.
Maybe it's even like a 3-year with a player option. Be like, okay, Knicks, I know this is all you can offer me, so I'll take it. But because you're way underpaying me, I want a player option on the last year. And if I'm still performing at this level, I can go back into free agency and maybe get more money.
Double player option. You want it after years 2 and years 3.
He is a little bit older than what you think too, because it took him quite a while to sort of find his feet in the NBA.
Yeah, I've seen he's 26. So if he does that for a year, hey, 30 when it ends, not a bad time to your last deal or last big deal. All right. Well, Dylan, any final takes or thoughts?
No, the free agency kind of sucks this year.
Yeah. Free agency sucks. The draft sucks. So if your team sucks,
basketball
sucks.
This, everyone, just stop watching.
Yeah, we're gonna have another Celtics championship. This all sucks. Just
let's
go.
Let's just switch to full-time WNBA.
I was gonna say cricket. USA beating Pakistan.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we'll do a WNBA thing soon. Cameron Brink tearing it up. Asia Wilson and gonna get another MVP from what it's looking like. Be a fun season. Maybe after the Olympics we can do a little more WNBA coverage.
Let's go.
All right. Well, find me on TikTok, Nate_HoopsTemple. You can also email us, hoopstemple@gmail.com. Or if you're listening to the show, there's a link somewhere that's got our Discord link. Jump in. Love to chat with you guys. Have a good week. Talk to you later.